I lost my job at 50, and then my wife said this. The day I got laid off, I didn't tell my wife. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 2 hours, engine off, staring at the concrete wall in front of me, and I said nothing. Not that night. Not the next morning. I drove to the same parking garage every single day for 3 weeks, and just sat there. If you've ever had a secret that felt too heavy to carry but too terrifying to put down, stay with me. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about myself, my marriage, and what it means to start over at 50. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 52 years old. I live in a beige colonial in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where everybody has a 2-car garage and a riding mower and a life that looks perfectly fine from the street. I worked for the same logistics company for 23 years. 23 years. I started when I was 27, eager and green, carrying my father's old briefcase because I couldn't afford a new one. I worked my way up from entry-level account management to regional director. That job was my identity. When people asked who I was, I told them what I did. I didn't know the difference. Then one Tuesday morning in February, HR called me into a glass-walled conference room, slid a folder across the table, and explained that due to corporate restructuring, my position was being eliminated. They thanked me for my service. They offered a severance package. They handed me a box for my desk belongings. 23 years. One box. I carried that box to my car. I put it in the trunk. And then I just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up at a Panera Bread off the highway. I sat there for 4 hours drinking coffee I didn't taste, watching people with somewhere to be walk in and out. Have you ever felt completely invisible at exactly the moment your life was falling apart? Like the world just kept moving and nobody noticed you'd stopped? My wife, Carol, had no idea. We'd been married 26 years. Good years. Hard years. The kind of marriage that weathers things. 2 kids, a miscarriage we never really talked about, her mother's slow decline from dementia, a period about 8 years ago where we were more roommates than partners. We came back from that. Or I thought we had. But here's what I hadn't told Carol or myself. In a long time, I was ashamed. Deeply, structurally ashamed of who I was becoming. The job loss cracked something open, but the fracture had been there for years. I'd been feeling invisible at work long before they let me go. Younger managers leaning over me in meetings. New systems I struggled to learn. A quiet, creeping sense that I was being tolerated rather than valued. I was 50 years old and I felt like I was already a relic. So every morning I put on my dress shirt, kissed Carol on the cheek, told her I was heading in early, and drove to that parking garage. I would sit there and scroll job listings on my phone, send applications into the void, eat a sad sandwich, and drive home at 5:30 like nothing had happened. I told myself I was protecting her, that I'd find something before she ever had to worry. That was the lie I chose. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that while I was disappearing into that garage every day, falling apart in slow motion, Carol knew something was wrong. She'd known for weeks, and she said nothing either. We were 2 people in a 26-year marriage, sitting across from each other at dinner every night, both of us pretending. Would you have said something? I've asked myself that 1,000 times. Would you have broken first? The lie collapsed on a Wednesday in March. I was backing out of the driveway, dressed for nowhere, and I heard Carol call from the front door. I rolled down the window. She was in her robe, holding a mug of coffee, and she had this look on her face. Not angry. Something quieter than angry. Something worse. She said, "Daniel, the company called the house. About your health insurance." And that was it. That was the thread that unraveled everything. I turned off the car. Couldn't look at her. I just sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, feeling like a man who'd been holding a dam together with his bare hands and suddenly had no strength left. I went inside. We sat at the kitchen table. And for the first time in 23 years, maybe longer, I told my wife the truth. Not just about the job. About all of it. The invisibility I'd felt for years. The fear that I'd peaked and was now just slowly declining. The terror that, without the career, I didn't know who I was. That I was afraid she'd see me differently. that I'd see myself differently. I talked for a long time. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a silence that felt enormous. I stared at the wood grain of the kitchen table. My father had a table like this. He lost his job once too. A factory closure in '89. He never recovered from it. He just got smaller and quieter until he died. I had always been afraid I was my father's son in all the ways that mattered most. And then Carol said something I wasn't expecting. She said, "Daniel, do you know what I thought every morning when you left?" I shook my head. She said, "I thought, at least he's still here. At least he comes home." She slid her hand across the table and covered mine. And then she said the thing that broke me completely open. And I mean that in the way that breaking can sometimes be the only way the light gets in. She said, "I don't need you to be successful. I need you to stop disappearing." I've thought about that sentence nearly every day since. I don't need you to be successful. I need you to stop disappearing. I had spent 3 weeks, hiding in a parking garage because I was afraid of being seen as less capable, less valuable, less of a man. And the woman who had shared my bed for 26 years, who had held my hand in a hospital when we lost a baby we'd already named, who had stayed through the years when we barely touched each other. She wasn't looking at my title. She never had been. That conversation didn't fix everything. I want to be honest about that. Recovery, financial, emotional, identity-level recovery, isn't a single moment. The months that followed were genuinely hard. I went to therapy for the first time in my life. Carol and I went together twice a month to a counselor's office in a strip mall that also had a nail salon and a tax preparation service. It was unglamorous, and it was exactly what we needed. I found work eventually. Not the same level. Not the same salary. I consult now, part-time, for smaller companies. I make less money than I did at 35. Some days that stings. But I come home and I sit at that kitchen table and Carol is there and I am not disappearing. I think about my father sometimes. I think about how he swallowed everything and went silent. I think about how I almost did the same thing. How close I came to just getting smaller and smaller in that parking garage until there was nothing left. The job was never the thing. I think I always knew that. I was just too afraid to find out what was underneath it. Is it ever too late to figure out who you actually are? I used to think the answer was yes. That after 50 the story was mostly written. That the chapters left were just footnotes. I don't believe that anymore. If you've ever hidden something from someone you love because you were too afraid of their disappointment, you'll understand why that morning in the driveway felt like the most important thing that ever happened to me. Not the job loss. Not the shame. The moment I finally stopped pretending. Carol still has her coffee every morning at that kitchen table. Sometimes I sit across from her and we don't say anything at all. And it doesn't feel like silence anymore. It feels like enough. If the story landed somewhere real for you, if you've carried something you were afraid to put down, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What would you have done? Have you ever been surprised by what someone said when you finally told the truth? And if you believe it's never too late to come back to yourself, and to the people who were waiting for you all along, there are more stories like this one here. Every week. For people who know that the second half of life isn't a footnote. It's the chapter worth writing.